We're all good to go, mate.
Hello and welcome back to the There's a Floodlight That Never Goes Out podcast. As always, I'm joined by Ed and Will, and I'm delighted to say we're joined by Alex Miller and Joe Crann of the Sheffield Star. How are we, lads?
All good, all good.
Very well, thank you, mate. Very well.
Good stuff. In today's episode of the podcast, we're going to be doing a Sheffield Wednesday season review. Now, this is probably going to be a lot more depressing than the Barnsley season review, and I know the lads, Ed, Joe, and Alex, are probably all going to have to say a few things that they didn't want to. But hey, that's the nature of Sheffield Wednesday's season. Kicking it off, then, of course, Sheffield Wednesday went down on the last day at Derby County. I mean, lads, what was it like being there?
It was pretty miserable, wasn't it, Alex?
Yeah, well, sort of the nature of a press box is sort of when you go to an away game, you sort of all the Wednesday writers and the press team all sitting. So there was this little row of Wednesday, and amongst quite a lot of Derby journalists and Derby staff members and the Derby bench and all the extended players were sat in the stand right in front of us. So we were very much in enemy territory, and at the final whistle, at the equalising goal, it was a bit gutting, really. But
there was one point when I was literally just like this, just my head on the desk. Sorry, go on, Alex.
I was just I haven't even told you this, Joe. So this is an exclusive for the pod. So I had this idea when it was 3-3 and we were going into the sort of the last minute. I had my iPhone and I put it on record just in case Wednesday scored, because I wanted to get, obviously people will know I'm not a Wednesdayite. Joe's a lifelong Wednesdayite, and I wanted to get Joe's reaction if the crazy happened and Wednesday scored in the last few seconds. But I was flicking through my phone the other day. I'd forgotten all about it, and it's just the most miserable piece of footage. It can never see the day that, I'm afraid.
No, it was really horrible, and the worst thing about it was, so obviously we got notifications on our phone and that for the Rotherham game, because obviously that made a big difference to us. And when Rotherham went 1-0 up, me and Alex and the guys around were just like, well, it don't really matter anymore. Like the other team won't really be bothered, so that game will finish 1-0 and we'll go down anyway. And then I get a notification on my phone saying Cardiff have equalised, and I'm like, I looked up and Shea Dunkley's just chopping him down, penalty, and I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even have a chance to finish my smile. Like, my smile was like halfway up my face, and no, get back down again. It was miserable. It really was. I spoke to TalkSport after the game, and they had Darren Ambrose on the phone, and they said to me, what was it like last time Wednesday went down the last day? And I said, yeah, that was pretty horrible. And I just heard Darren Ambrose going, yeah, not for me, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, he was at Palace, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He scored that day, I think.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
there was a sort of, I guess that was the only sort of consolation, I guess, that there wasn't that period where we all thought we would stay up, and then it was sort of took away from us. It was sort of like a double whammy subconsciously. I guess that was one of the positives. And the actual game itself, I said to the lads after, I don't know how that's finished, the scoreline it was, because it wasn't a 3-3 game at all.
It was
rubbish.
really
Poor quality.
Yeah. What were your words that you bottled on your headline, Alex, or in your tweet? Something about dog and duck, was it?
Yeah, I was going to do a preview of that game between Derby. Obviously going into the last couple of weeks, Wednesday were the form team in that relegation scrap with a rousing record of 2 wins in 8. I was going to call it the Red Lion versus the Dog Duck, survival in the camp. I thought better of it.
Yeah. Moving on to a more broad picture then. At the start of the season, let's not kid ourselves. Essex wasn't full of hope. But under Gary Monk, the Owls did sort of have a decently positive start. That was, of course, until he got the sack. Lads, how do you summarise that first portion of the season under Monk?
It was weird, wasn't it? Because I mean, me and Alex have spoken about this quite a lot. I genuinely think that if Wednesday hadn't fired Gary Monk, they would not have got relegated. I genuinely believe that. I think that the sort of the confusion, the carnage that came in the aftermath of that with Tony Pulis, with Tomo coming in, not sure if he was staying around, then he did stick around, and then obviously Darren came in. And this is not at all me saying anything anti-Darren Moore, because I'm genuinely delighted that he's there. I think he's an incredible appointment, and I think he's exactly the sort of person Wednesday needs to take him forward. But the fact of the matter is that the signings that were made at the start of the season were made for Gary Monk and the way that Gary Monk wanted to play. And I really do think that I'm not by any stretch saying I thought we would have challenged for playoffs or anything like that. But especially with when it went to -6 from -12, I mean, Wednesday had a 10-point week before Gary got fired. And I really do think that if Wednesday had stuck with him over the course of the season, fan anger aside, because that is something to take into account with the decision that the chairman made. The fans were absolutely over him.
It was toxic,
and that ship had sort of very much sailed. And I do think that was something that the chairman took into account when he made his decision. But yeah, for me, and I think Alex thinks the same thing, that if it had been a case of just letting Gary Monk do his thing over the course of the season, I don't think Wednesday would be in League One now.
Yeah, I'm not. It wouldn't have been pretty, and like Joe said, I think fan feeling had lurched quite a long way from content. But yeah, I sort of subscribe to that. I think they might have just, having seen how the season went, and the lack of quality and how tired teams were towards the end. I just think if what was it, a handful of points. I just wonder whether, because apart from anything else, there's this old adage that footballers will hold on to an excuse like a life raft when they've got one, and the conveyor belt of off-field things, new managers, all this sort of stuff, it perhaps gave Wednesday players a little bit of an out. I don't think that's every Wednesday player by any stretch, but yeah, and like Joe says, the squad was built for a certain style of play, and the case in point's probably someone like Izzy Brown, who started really well in the season and then just didn't feature, and ultimately we may never know what the full story is there. Obviously he had issues with fitness and all that sort of stuff, but no other manager seemed to get on board with him, and Gary was the one who just started to get a tune out of him early doors. But yeah, certainly a massive call getting rid of Gary Monk and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think, was it one of you two who wrote an article? I remember reading about Izzy Brown. He was saying how, he would be open to staying, permanently.
Yeah, yeah, that was me.
I mean,
I went well.
Didn't turn out how he would have liked, hopefully.
No, and the whole Izzy Brown thing was really weird. Like, and like Alex says, I don't think we'll ever know the full story there. But I don't think I saw, and maybe I'm sort of looking back with rose-tinted the glasses on. I don't remember watching Izzy Brown have a bad game when he started.
No.
He always struggled when he came off the bench. And I don't think, on the flip side, I don't think I ever saw him really turn it on coming off the bench. But in the games that he started, he always looked a bit of a cut above. And I'm still really gutted that we didn't get to see more of the Bannon, Luongo, Brown centre midfield trio, because I think that could have been really, really quality. But yeah, it's sad because I was lucky enough to get to sort of sit down one-on-one with Izzy, and he's a good lad. Like, he was really open and really honest with me, and he said to me then, like, he said he'd never felt, and he knew it was a criticism of himself, and he knew that it wasn't, it was something he had to work on. But he said he always felt like he struggled coming off the bench. It just wasn't his game. He needed to be in it from the get-go. And I mean, you can probably count on two hands the amount of games he started over the course of the season, maybe on one even.
Well, the Luton game is obviously Luton away. That first 45, he was brilliant.
He was class as well.
Don't have to talk about the second half, but the first half, he was scintillating.
Yeah, no, please don't talk about that game. I've still got PTSD from that. That second half broke me.
The problem, unfortunately, for much of the fan base, but it was the infamous tweet at the end of the season tweet, wasn't it, by Brown? And,
yeah, that corner didn't help either.
Yeah, Rotherham, yeah, I blocked that one out. But no, just sort of unfortunately summed it up a little bit. Obviously, after Monk, we had, was it 10 games under Pulis? What did you make of that? Because as a fan, I remember at the time when he was announced, there was obviously a bit of apprehension, but it was like, okay, he'll keep us up. He's the right man. But then pretty much from the get go, it just seemed destined to fail. I mean, I think
in disparaging terms because what he's achieved in the game. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's my
disclaimer.
However, any sort of fears over how turgid it would be did not cover. It was just that the style of play was really, really poor, and that's okay when you've got a team that's built to play that way, and it comes back to that thing about Harry Monk that we've already said. Wednesday,
and you get results out of it.
Yeah, and you've got to have a defense that can concentrate, and that is dependable and all the rest of it. Wednesday don't have that, so I think the best in terms of style of play, and all right, results didn't quite come off, but towards the end of the season with Darren Moore, I think, and certainly with Neil Thompson when he went on that really good 7-game run, I think the more this group of players were given a little bit of freedom to go forward and try and create things, and it didn't always happen, but the more that the squad got out of it. So I think Pulis was obviously a poor appointment as it bore out. I mean, the column that I wrote when he was appointed was, this bloke will keep Wednesday up, and it's a great appointment. And it's a column that I regret, quite frankly. It was,
but it was founded upon evidence,
Yeah,
Alex. At least it wasn't as bad as my story at the start of the season saying, "Can people give Chansiri a bit more credit based on the signings he's made?" That didn't go particularly well either.
I think later on we'll rank some of the signings, but yeah, it certainly didn't pan out. I mean, the whole season, so as bad as we thought it might be, it somehow managed just to get a little bit worse.
Ed, I think on the Purely series is probably the only part where me and Will can actually offer some insight.
Yeah.
But I will bring Will in, but I mean, we beat you 2-1 at Hillsborough. Do you know how mythical the circumstances have to be for Barnsley to win at Hillsborough? You know what I mean? This doesn't happen. And we beat you 2-1, and we beat you well. I mean, Will, how poor was the football Wednesday played on that day?
Yeah, I mean, you got that really early goal as well, didn't you? So it was almost like the game was in your hands. You scored that goal, I thought, here we go again. Typical Hillsborough disease for Barnsley. But no, it was just, I remember all afternoon it was, we played long ball, I'll not deny that, but you were trying to play long ball with just Josh Windass on his own up front, and it was terrible to watch. And then when we got it down on the floor, Barnsley were able to pass it around Wednesday easy, and when that's happening, something's going wrong. And yeah, Pulis just, with that set of players, I don't think it was going to work.
I think the other thing to be said, Joe and I sort of get whispers from within the camp every now and again, and it just never clicked with the squad in the same way that Gary Monk was very popular. Darren Moore, it sounds like he's very popular, but just basic things. He was getting people's names wrong weeks into his appointment at Wednesday and all this sort of stuff. So it just never clicked. He never connected with the players. It seemed that the players weren't all that comfortable with the style of play, and it wasn't a sound enough decision to get rid of him early doors.
There was a lot of talk of when it was afterwards, when he was gone. There was a lot of talk of shackles off and analogies like that, wasn't there, from a lot of different players. It was all the players were talking about how now we've been given a little bit of freedom, shackles off, a bit more attacking impetus, and all that was sort of under Tomo when Tomo first came in. And,
do you think the squad has a sort of, not a weak mentality, I think that's the wrong word, but I think they sort of, a lot of them epitomise modern day footballers, and with a sort of Pulis who isn't afraid to berate a squad, do you think that played a part in it?
I think, I mean, you say it's a bit harsh, but I don't know if it is, because I do think there is a weak mentality there.
I was just trying to be polite.
I know you were, but I do think there is a bit of a, the amount of games where they've gone, where they went up and still lost or drew, the lack of games in which they actually got a result from a losing position. I think it's difficult to argue that there isn't a weak mentality there when you have that as a. I mean, that is it's factual, isn't it? That's not an opinion. Like those stats are there for all to see. And I think the fact that Darren has gone to the sort of wipe the slate clean mentality, I think shows that he probably agrees with that there needs to be changes there. I think with Wednesday, I think it is important to add also with the exits, there is an element of people saying, well, Darren's got rid of all these players, when it's not necessarily the case. Some players will have been released because they didn't want to stay. A good example of it is I was talking to someone else about it the other day, Joe Pelopessi, for instance. Someone said to me, "Oh yeah, well he's rubbish," and obviously Darren agrees with me because he's leaving. And I'm just like, well, you don't know that that's his decision. I don't know either way, but there is a chance that they said to Joey, "Do you fancy League One?" And he's going, "Well, I've got a top flight club in Holland who are looking to take me on, so I think I'll take my chances going home, thanks."
Yeah.
I mean, the Pelopessi hate is, I don't get it personally. It's one of the worst things about our fan base. It was the hate of Pelopessi, especially the second half of the season. He was one of our best performers when he played, and we missed him. Obviously, we had like the period under Neil Thompson, which started well, and then sort of it was at February, wasn't it, where we had a load of games, and everyone was saying we need to win this amount of games, and then in that period, and we barely got a point. But then more.
Honestly, just before you go on, the amount of times this season when me and Alex have looked at running games and gone, right, 9 points minimum from this. Maybe 6 will do. We'll take 2. 2 points would be good from these 2 games. Yeah. And there was at least 3 or 4 times in the season when we were saying that. The worst one was quite sort of just before Gary went, when it was, I think it was Rotherham, Wickham, and
that was.
Who was the other one?
Luton, right?
Oh yeah, it was Luton, and we were like, yeah, 9 points, yeah, but we'll take 7. 7 would do, and then we ended up getting 0, and then about a week later, Gary Monk got fired after a win.
Towards the end of the season, it was like after every defeat or every draw, it was like, okay, now they're definitely down. But just everyone else kept losing. It ended up going to the last kick of the game, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look back and you think, what could have been? But the be all and end all is we weren't good enough. But I do think under Moore, like there is that sense of positivity, and in League One, I genuinely think our chances of at least the top 6 finish next season, providing Chancery backs him, not necessarily with money, but just the players he wants, on frees and loans and stuff like that, is imperative. But I am confident. I mean, do you think Wednesday can be hopeful for a good season next season?
It's entirely dependent on what happens in the next few weeks, isn't it? Because ultimately we have no idea the rumor mill, if you like, and the conversations that Joe and I are having. Nothing appears to be moving, and I think Joe's made the point a couple of times. I think once playoffs are out of the way, that'll be when stuff starts going, because there's a lot of teams involved in that, and when clubs can have a look at their financial futures, when it's confirmed beyond all doubt that full grounds next season from ball one, that'll encourage clubs a lot as well. So yeah, I think it might be a little bit slow moving over the next couple of weeks, but I'd hate to talk about what we can expect from Wednesday until we've got at least some idea of the sort of players that they're after. We really don't know. So yeah, I'm going to bat that one away, Ed, I'm afraid.
Just before we get on to next season, there's something I'd like to have a bit of an insight into, and that is the recruitment process prior to Darren Moore being appointed. Now, there was a lot of names that were sort of dangled in the face of Sheffield Wednesday supporters. Was there anyone who was close to taking the job before Darren?
It depends who you ask. I suppose that's the long and short of it.
What about Thorsten Fink? Because I remember, I think Joe, you tweeted about Thorsten Fink.
So Thorsten Fink was very much interested in the job, and I know that he, he put his name forward, all that kind of stuff, and then it just kind of fizzled out for whatever reason. And I think the interesting thing with Darren is that a lot of people say, why did it take him so long to appoint him? But ultimately, we don't know what the process was. You know, people say, oh, he should have gone for him straight after Tony. Maybe he wasn't available. Maybe Donny were asking too much at that point and it just wasn't feasible to get him out. So I think there's a lot of stuff that, me and Alex speak about it quite a lot, like when we're doing stories about, you know, what is fair criticism and what isn't. You know, what is justifiable to go, this is the wrong way of going about things. But then there's also stuff that I think some fans will hammer people for that's just out of people's hands a little bit. You know, there's not too much you can do about it. I think the retained list, for instance, is something like that in terms of justifiable criticism. A lot of people were like, why haven't they released the retained list? The season's been done for a week, and it's like, well, because they only found out 5 days ago what division they were going to be in. Like, give them a bit of a break in this scenario. But yeah, with the managers, it got a bit daft, didn't it, Alex? Like, there was just names being thrown out all over the place because someone ended up on the bookies list, and then it's like, yeah, it's definitely happening. And some of it was literally just a guy on Twitter had said,
Yeah.
just bumped into someone who's wearing a blue shirt. Must be going to Wednesday.
Yeah, the Wikipedia searches on these weird and wonderful names from across Europe. There was a point where, well, Joe helped me out with it, but I got in touch with a guy that had been linked from Sweden. He was a manager of one of the clubs in the top tier in Sweden, and I rang him, spoke to him about Sheffield Wednesday, and he didn't in as many words, but he basically said he was Sheffield Wednesday. and like for a couple of days before, we'd had a couple of whispers that this was the guy. So it can be a bit of a painful job at times.
Welcome to
say, like, honestly, at one point there was me and Alex were literally just going down the list, and we were actually making some progress with getting in touch with all these different people, everyone whose name got linked. And it's not often you make that kind of progress in terms of actually being able to get through to people. But at one point, like, me and Alex were speaking to like 8, 9, 10 of the different people who were apparently in the running for the job, and every single one of them was like, no, it's not true.
Did you not speak to Darren? We just want
one of them. No, so Darren, at one point, Darren sort of batted it away completely. It was only, I think that one, I'm right in saying, Alex, that happened quite quickly in the end, didn't it? Like, in terms of actually an agreement being reached.
Yeah, I think the initial link came out of, I think Wednesday had people watching Donny for a fair bit of the season. So the initial link sort of came out of that before I think it was known that maybe they were or weren't, maybe they weren't at the time watching, with a view to getting Darren Moore on board. And then everything happened relatively quickly. So it came off the back of the Luton game, didn't it? But our understanding is that Wednesday had approached Doncaster the week before, the Thursday or the Friday before that actually happened. So it wasn't like a snap appointment, we need to get someone in because of that nightmare at Luton. It was going to happen anyway. And I think it was relatively quick turnaround from actual first approach to them unveiling him.
Yeah. I don't know what you were going to say, Ed, but I think it's time maybe that we throw some names and give them exam grades. So. I will act as the teacher in this scenario, and I'll ask you four lads for grades on these names, and they will be quite rapid. So, sort of maybe to spend 10 seconds on saying why you think.
What are the grades?
Sort of A to U for science. A to U.
We're going to cater for your ears.
Bear in mind, these are the lads that we're going to be asking to do exclusive interviews.
That's absolutely fine. You can be as politically correct and as polite as you want to be. Don't worry.
Yeah.
A-stars all around.
Yeah.
I think they've all been great.
Fair, some of them have left now. In fact, the majority.
Yeah, we still want to interview him, mate.
Absolutely, be as polite as you want. I'll give my honest opinion. Don't worry.
Right. So, kicking it off, Izzy Brown. What grade are we giving him, Ed?
A.
I'm gonna give him a D, but nothing personal. It's just you can't give anyone who barely played anything more than a D. And but for the first half at Luton alone, he avoids an E, so a D.
Well,
I'll give him a C. I think a bit harsh criticising someone who's not playing. It's not his fault he's not playing. And I think the stick he got for that corner was a bit too over the top, so I'll give him a C.
Yeah, Joe.
I'm gonna go with a D as well, purely on the basis that we didn't see enough of him. I am still genuinely of the belief that in terms of technical ability, Izzy Brown is one of the best players that was at Sheffield Wednesday this season. From the bit that I did see of him. But that being said, you can't really give anyone a decent mark when they played, next to no minutes really.
And Alex, come on, you give us the truth.
Yeah, I'll go with D as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like a school report way of putting it. Like showed early promise at the start of the term, but wasn't time.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, many Sheffield Wednesday fans picked the player of the season, Jack Marriott. Ed, what are you saying for Jack?
Just an F. I feel sorry for Marriott because whatever it didn't work out. And again, it's nothing personal. Just didn't see him enough at all. And he didn't have a first half at Luton like Izzy Brown, so I can't give him, the same as Izzy.
Yeah, Will.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Ed. Like, of the highlights I watch of Wednesday, I can't say he featured in many highlights, so not that there were many, but yeah, no.
Mate, I watched every game, every minute, and he didn't feature him in the highlights either.
Oh dear.
Well, I won't say the names now. I'll just presume that we've got the clockwork. So, yeah, Joe, and then we'll stop saying.
Look, I for whatever reason it didn't work out for Jack at Wednesday, and it's an interesting one because he just like with Izzy was there. Izzy was there and he was in training, and he didn't get games for whatever reason. Jack Marriott wasn't there for a lot of it. Like, there was a period when he was back at Derby. There was a bit when he was, Tomo just said he wasn't there. And when we pushed him on it, he's like, you can, what was it you said, Alex? He says, you can use your own common sense on that, or something like that. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think with... Sorry?
We don't have any Tomo. You're going to have to tell us, mate.
Well, did he have, unfortunately, personal issues then, do you think? Is that what?
Well, they said personal, but they didn't say what that was. So it could have been a whole variety of things, and I just don't think it's our place to sort of speculate that, So me and Alex kind of steered clear of that, because it's like, well, if they want to tell us, they tell us. So, leave that with Jack in his private life. But yeah, it was, I think it's, you can't really give him much more than an F, because he hardly played any minutes. He didn't score. He didn't really have that many shots either when he was on. And it just didn't work out for him in any way, shape or form, whether that's down to, sort of actual playing time or even just his spell at the club. It just doesn't feel like it was ever a good fit for him. And I wish him all the best, because it's going to take some coming back from this. I can't imagine that he was too pleased with being voted sarcastically as player of the year either.
Yeah. I presume that your grade's probably going to be similar to the rest of the lads as Alex for Marriott.
I'd give him an A personally. No, I think so. Everything that Joe said basically, but I don't know. I don't think it was easy for him. I don't think there's any notion that he was phoning it in or anything like that. But obviously he had a series of injury. I think around the January time, Derby had the option to bring him back, and it sounded for a long time like Derby were going to do that. And then at the last minute, everything sort of changed. So, there was a lot of stuff going on with Jack Marriott, and probably an F.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't spend all the time basically just doing every player in the squad. So I'll move on to some of the better ones, and then we'll round off with managers and Chansiri. But some of the better players in the Wednesday squad, in probably the only portion of this podcast where Wednesday will get a bit of praise. Josh Windass, what grade are you giving him, Ed?
An A. Just because I want to give someone an A to feel a bit of positivity. And I think he was player of the season for me, purely because of the end of the season. He's sort of the only player who I felt could drive with the ball when he had it at his feet. Okay, decision making wasn't the best at all times, but no one's was really. got some crucial goal and assists, albeit in vain. Obviously, what happened, and also if you believe his dad Dean and his Instagram stories, he'll have it known he's staying. So for that alone, give him an A.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough.
I'd probably have to go maybe one lower, bring Ed down a bit, give him a B. I think he was definitely one of Wednesday's better players, but I reckon I could have had a go up front at one point, so I don't say an awful lot. But no, like you say, he's definitely one of the better players, and if he does stay, sort of player I can see doing well in League One.
Yeah, definitely. Joe?
Yeah, I'm with Will. A B. I don't think he did enough over the entirety of the season to warrant an A probably, but especially towards the end. If Wednesday had stayed up, it would have been in large part down to Josh Windass, because the way he ended the season was so strong. I think one thing with Josh is that he's such a willing runner, and he literally just runs his bollocks off.
Yeah.
And you can see sometimes he gets increasingly frustrated that he's running and no one's finding him, and sort of the balls aren't getting through to him for whatever reason. And I don't think you can ever sort of criticize his work ethic or anything like that. But there were, I think if he'd performed throughout the entire season like he did in the last 10 games or so, then he would have been a shoo-in for player of the season. But I don't think he did enough over the entirety to give him sort of top marks. But he was definitely one of Wednesday's best players for this season, and for me, the sign of the season as well, from a Wednesday perspective.
Yeah. And Alex?
I'll go B+. People forget, and it was a weird sort of tessellation, if that's the right word, even if it is a word. But when that purple patch that Wednesday had under Tomo, Josh wasn't in the team at that point. He spent sort of 5 or 6 games where he was coming off the bench every now and again. He was an unused sub in a few games. And then off the back of that, he obviously came into the team and had the end of the season that he did. So, yeah, sort of echo what everyone said, really. I think, if they had managed to get that goal at Derby, a lot of it would have been sort of based around Josh Windass, because he was so important, wasn't he, towards the end?
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to Wednesday's midfield maestro, Barry Bannon. Ed, how would you rate his season?
A B. I think again one of our star performers, and the way he's committed to another 2 years. Fair play to him. Surprising. I don't know why he's putting himself through it, but fair play to him.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I'd give him a B. It was particularly in the game at Oakwell. Obviously, watching 90 minutes, it was really impressive. Was Barry Bannon in midfield, and again in League One now he's staying. He's sort of player who, can make you such a good team in League One, having that top midfielder. So yeah.
I think we might end up with B's across the board. Yeah. From my perspective, Barry is remarkable. Like honestly, and I don't say that lightly. As a footballer, he's so good. I generally think that. Looking back to when Forestieri was there, for instance, you look at him and Forestieri. They're the best 2 players I've seen at Wednesday in the modern era since the Di Canio Carboni bit for me, I suppose. But he didn't quite have the full season that you can expect from a player of his quality. He was really good I think Watford, he was brilliant in the second game against Watford. He was really good, and then obviously Cardiff. That's one of the best individual performances I've seen of a Wednesday player in a while. But yeah, he never goes missing, and he really, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, he really gives a shit. And I think that's one thing that you can always say about Bannon, is that he genuinely really gives a shit about this football club.
Yeah, I mean, if he had a right foot, he'd be a Premier League player. It's as simple as that. Genuinely. That's the only thing holding him back, is that his inability to use his right foot at times, and also his height. But every time he makes a header, you got to note that sort of thing, because they're a rarity, aren't they?
I'd probably go for his choice of hair transplant clinic as well. I mean, I bet he spent a fortune and he's got that Barnet to thank. And
him and Fletcher went at the same time, I seem to remember. And to be fair, they've both turned out quite well. I mean, Stephen Fletcher's hairline, the way that's revived, it's unreal.
I will say one of my favourite moments of this season, I think it might have been Watford, where I think he wore about 6 different pairs of boots in the same game. At one point, he was wearing two different boots at the same time. It was good that.
Yeah. Alex.
Yeah, I'll go for a B as well. By the way, I'm absolutely here for Potty Mouth Cran being the bad boy of Sheffield journalism. What is it? Sheffield or whatever. Yeah, B for me. I think the first game of the season against Cardiff, there was no coincidence really that when he stood out, the team scored goals. You know, it's like a chicken and egg thing, isn't it? But when he had players in front of him going at the 5-0, Watford that didn't score, but yeah, when he's ticking, Wednesday are better. It's that simple.
Yeah. And now this is a player who I'm only going to pick as the 3 best players for Wednesday season, because when we had you on the first time, Joe, you said he was your player of the year at the time. We'll see how it's changed. Tom Lees.
I knew that was coming.
I think a B. You know, it's sad to see how it ended. He was good in patches. His only issue, if Barry Bannon's issue is his right foot, Tom Lees is his ability to sort of play out on the back, his confidence. That was the problem. You know, he did have a clanger in him. But no, obviously sad to see the injury at Borough and that sort of put him out of action. But yeah, a B.
Yeah, I'd probably go. I'd probably have to say a C, but that's mainly because being not a Wednesday fan, the bits I see of him are when he drops a clanger. So obviously that's in the forefront of my mind. But yeah, I gave him a C. He's a sort of a decent defender, isn't he? But yeah, he's not had an outstanding season, but who has at Wednesday? So
I feel like I'm just agreeing with Will on every one. I think we've had the same score. Because I'm also going to see there was a point when Tom was the most consistent player in the side. He was, for me, you know, I think I said when we spoke last time that he very rarely was less than a 7 out of 10. He did tail off towards the end of the season. Annoyingly, after me, Alex, and Dom had all said player of the season, definitely player of the season, and then he had about 4 games when he had a shocker. But yeah, he did tail off towards the end a little bit. But I got a lot of time for Tom. Incredible professional. The way that he reacted to having the captaincy taken off him was brilliant. And he's just a good, like I say, good solid pro who I think for the most part of the season was tidy enough. And he's another one, like he gives his all. He throws himself into everything and he's not afraid to get stuck in. And I think that, you know, it's very, very sad the way that Tom Lees has left with his injury, without a real send-off, all that kind of stuff, because he's been a hell of a servant to this football club.
Yeah, definitely. Alex?
B for me. I think I put Lees marginally ahead of Bannon in my Player of the Year rundown. So yeah, good solid defender, like I say. It's the end of the season. It's probably the same with Windass. The end of the season always lives sort of brightest in your memory, and ultimately that's the end of the season that matters, isn't it? But for such a long time, I think I used the phrase Tom Lees is Wednesday's Player of the Year by a million miles on Twitter at one point. And obviously that, yeah, it was about the time that, as Joe says, he made us all look a bit daft, unfortunately. But yeah, without doubt, I think he's behind Windass for me as Player of the Year.
Yeah. Now as we move on to the multiple managers, I'll flip the order. So Alex going first now. We'll start then with the first gaffer, and that is of course Gary Monk. How do you rate Gary Monk from sort of A to F?
Tough one. You see, it's funny. Aside, you can't take out that week, but you take out that mad week, you're probably looking at, I don't know, a B, C. I'd have to look back at the results, but bearing in mind he was in charge of the recruitment, wasn't he? D minus. Oh, is that harsh? Yeah, D minus.
Being the American system with a plus and minus.
Yeah, I'll go to Joe for a bit more of a scathing view, I think.
No, you won't get anything more scathing from me, because you know, as I said earlier, I think that we probably would have stayed up if we'd stuck with him.
Yeah.
Because you can criticise the Alex saying there about the recruitment, but would the recruitment have been so bad if he'd been in charge for it all? We'll never know that. I think I'll probably go D, because that 1 week, it really did cripple us. That week, you can never look at one point in the season and go, that's what sent us down, because especially this season, there's been a lot of those. But you take 6 points from that week, and it's a big difference in the season.
Yeah. Will?
I think I'd probably give him a C. I think the thing with Monk was for me, I think he still had a lot to give. I was part of he was sacked too soon sort of frame of mind, and so for that, I think, like you say, he'd brought in those players. You've got to give him a bit of time to get him as a squad and get him working how he wants them to. So I would give him a C.
Yeah, and Ed?
A D, because he used phrases like, we compounded those mistakes pretty much every single interview, and by the end of it, the mistakes were just being compounded, so you need to just accept it. But yeah, he was dealt a tough hand, but he could have done better, but could have done a lot worse.
Now, I know we've spoken about him earlier, but I hope this is fireworks. It's like the naughty kid at parents' evening. Tony Pulis, Alex.
F minus. Can I just say as well, that decibel system that Ed suggested was an American thing. I don't know about
Is it
Joe.
American?
But when I was at school, that was still a thing. I don't know whether it is like you lads.
Yeah,
No.
Alex, I just think they're too young for us, mate. I think
We're on the numbers system.
Yeah,
now,
we're on
Alex.
numbers.
1 to
So.
9.
Oh, don't get me started.
That is a long
We'll
gone.
go.
School isn't hard as it used to be, I'll tell you, lads.
Yeah. But grade for Tony's an F minus. Joe.
Yeah, I'll go F as well. Obviously, it was grim. Like, it was. Do you know the worst thing about it? I know we spoke about him earlier. Like, when his first interview as Wednesday manager, it was so good. Like, It was, honestly, it was PR 101. Like, he had us all eating out the palm of his hand. It was brilliant. Like, after that interview, I was like, absolutely no chance we're going down. Wednesday's staying up. Like, we're not going to have any worries here. It's going to be fine. But yeah, like Alex said earlier, they never really bought into him. The football was pretty grim, and the results spoke for themselves, really. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'll be a tad little bit nice. I'll give him an E, and that the sole reason he's not an F is for me is the team he was working with simply wasn't a Pulis team at all, and so for that reason I'd probably not give him an F. But like you say, it's just, I remember when he got the job, I remember saying to Ed, it won't be pretty, but he'll get the job done. And I think everyone thought he'd get the job done, but yeah, he definitely didn't do that.
Yeah, Ed.
An F. Joe talked about that first press conference. Well, he told Wednesday fans the two things they love to hear, which is A, you're bigger than United, and B, I'll bring back Kieran Westwood. And as soon as he said that, everyone was hooked. But
And he also referred to us all by our first name as well, which is schoolboy, but it works.
Yeah. Was he nice? Was he? You interview him.
Yeah, he was brilliant. Well, in that one he was. In the first one he was. I remember there was one at Norwich when we just lost to Norwich, and we played all right that game. It was at Norwich, and we played all right. And he just did not want to do a press conference afterwards. He came. I think me and Dom asked about 4 questions, and then he left.
Really?
None of it.
He had this thing where you needed to follow up, because as Joe says, he wanted to get away from media as quickly as possible. So you had to follow up your questions as quick, because if there was a gap, you'd stop for breath, you'd walk off, he'd go, right, end of interview, see you later. Like, it was just a nightmare. And you end up sort of like spilling over your questions, like one after another. It was difficult to get a rhythm with him, but yeah. I mean, he was very quotable, which managers aren't. So for people like me and Joe, it was a dream. It's just a shame the football didn't follow suit.
Yeah.
The famous quote was that one. Was it after the Forest game where he said you can squeeze and squeeze, but sometimes the pips aren't there? And yeah, pretty damning indictment, that, isn't it?
Yeah. There was a few bits like that. I remember Huddersfield away. That was my sort of closest to Joe's Norwich experience, where we were an absolute inconvenience. You know, he came out very late and spoke to us in the shortest possible term. I think I asked him, "Is there enough leadership in that changing room?" And he said, "Well, what do you think?" I was like, "Well, I can't really put that in the paper, Tone. You know what I mean? You know, penny for your thoughts, mate, sort of thing." But yeah, he was he was very clever in the way that he dealt with us. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. Moving on to the stopgap then, Neil Thompson. How do you rate his sort of spell?
Is it me? I would go for. I'll go C plus, maybe a B minus. Ultimately, the only reason Wednesday were in it for so long was because of that month or 6 weeks when everything was going well. But for whatever reason, you know, they couldn't hold on to it. I think I'm right in saying he was in charge of both the best spell of the season and the worst spell, because they lost 7 in a row, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably edging towards a C really rather than a B. But yeah, but like a bloke that I never got the impression it was a job that he wanted to do. He was sort of landed with it. But yeah, did a good, honest job. Clearly cares about the club, and as I say, had the best and the worst. So a really sort of a spell of two halves. If things had carried on for another 2 weeks, a month, you know, on that run that they were on, then, you know, we could be talking about Neil Thompson full-time Sheffield Wednesday manager, maybe. Whether he'd have taken it, I don't know, because he hated the job at point.
Yeah,
Joe. Yeah, I'll go C as well for Tom. I think he really did steady the ship at that first point. I think maybe the chairman held on a little bit too long to it, and thought, if I change it now, is it going to make things worse, sort of thing. But obviously after that Luton game, that was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. But yeah, Tomo did a really good job, and the players love him as well. The players really do like him. We've got a lot of time for him, and he's outlasted all of us. He's been at the club for like a decade, you know. Like, I think there's only probably like Liam Palmer who's been there longer. And as Alex said, he bleeds Sheffield Wednesday at the minute. Like, you can't fault him for anything really. And it actually bugged me a little bit when people were criticising him when the run turned and things weren't going our way. It bugged me a bit, because it's just like, this guy clearly doesn't want this job. Like, give him a break. He's doing it because there's no one else to do it, really.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, like you say, he was dealt a very difficult hand, wasn't he? And sort of did his best, and at times that was the best Wednesday had seen all season. So
through without her, you're on mute, mate.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
No.
It doesn't say.
Wait, can you not hear me? Oh dear.
To maintain, so you know that's fully understandable.
Well,
can you hear me now? Have I returned?
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah, we're back.
Yeah, no, I was just saying he was dealt a difficult hand, wasn't he? And he did a good job. You know, like you say, one of the best runs Wednesday went on all season. So I'd probably give him a C. You know, because he did what was also in charge during that bad run, but how much can you blame the guy who, like you say, was just kind of shoved there, you know, without really wanting to be there? So yeah, I'd give him a C.
Yeah.
I go C again. Tale of two halves, really. And I don't think I don't think the good spell was particularly down to Thompson himself. It's more just him just freeing the players. And likewise, I don't think the bad spell was down to Thompson himself. It was, you know, just what happened. That bad spell seemed to go really quickly. I mean, you talk about losing 7 games in a row, but for me personally, it didn't feel like that just because of the sort of velocity of the games and they were coming so frequently before you knew it. That month where we had
absolutely felt like that when you were there, mate. I tell you.
Really. Well, when you're watching from the comfort of your living room on iFollow, it's quite easy just to switch it off and forget about it. You know what I mean? Avoid Twitter for the rest of the night and you're good. But
if only I could avoid Twitter.
Oh yeah. Well, I had to mute #DCFC on that final day because I just the celebrations and like Colin Kazim Richards doing the bounce chant with them. I just couldn't see it on my timeline because it wasn't jealousy. It was just embarrassment for them.
Yeah, that's what you say. Imagine if Wednesday had stayed up.
Well,
mate, if Wednesday had stayed up that day, my journalistic integrity was going straight out the window.
Well, I mean, you talked there about your celebrations. One question, there's not going to be many answers to choose from here, but what is your favourite moment covering the club? Because I feel yeah.
I don't have to think about it because there is no other day. That's literally it.
Yeah.
That's it for me. That game, I wasn't at the Cardiff opening day game. The Cardiff 5-0 was quite fun because it was literally just me and Alex looking at each other going, surely not.
No.
Surely not.
If you remember, I wasn't there, so I wasn't at Bournemouth.
Oh no, sorry, you weren't there. Yeah, you weren't there for that one. It was obviously, I think it was Dom I was sat next to, but yeah, it was that one. The Cardiff game was literally just like, is this really happening? Like we've been awful for so long. Where's this come from? But yeah, Bournemouth, just the nature of it, and also the fact you can hear me celebrating on camera, which is quite embarrassing.
Yeah, Alex.
Well, yeah, like Joe says, the 2 standout matches of the season, I was sat in my front room, sort of miles from it. I don't know whether I'm a jinx or whatever. Yeah, Joe brought it up. The first day of the season, like sunny day down in Cardiff. I'd stayed over. My uncle lives down there, so stayed over Saturday night and had a few beers, and it was like there was a genuine sense of it was still 12 points at that stage, but there was a genuine sense of right. So it's 9 points now, and they might be all right here. Things were moving. There were still players to be added, and it was all downhill from there.
Well, Quest. I remember watching Quest that night because you're a classic fan that doesn't watch Quest unless we win. Because what's the point of watching the highlights?
Yeah.
Well, Colin Murray was speaking about, could they get playoffs? You look back now and you're thinking,
God.
We jumped the gun so much there.
It is very sad that Alex's best moment of the season was literally the first day.
I can't think of anything else. Yeah, that was probably it for me.
You actually missed a fair few wins this season, didn't you? Like in general, like not even like good wins. You missed quite a lot of wins, period.
Yeah, and there weren't that many wins. It was ridiculous. Like,
how many times do you think you saw him win this season? We only won 10 or 11.
I'd have to have a count back, but bearing in mind the home form, if I've seen more than 5 wins, I'd be surprised. It's been quite, and bearing in mind when Dom left and I was on the Star on my own from like February last year, it's been pretty miserable in terms of results. The best job in the world, and but yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I feel like I should point this out, and this is, I thought it was just me being sort of nesh about it because I've come back from South Africa. But I've spoken to a lot of people. It's been absolutely Baltic all year. Literally, from the first game I went to at home against QPR, I have been cold at every single football match I have attended. And I'm not a fan of it. Not a fan at all.
Well, this May, like this time last year, it was well nice. Mediterranean.
Yeah, Alex was away at, was it Swansea?
When, well, in terms of the heat?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was basically in hot pants and a tank top.
Well, I've heard people like journalists at football games starting to get these sort of heated gilets. Have you
Mike
thought
McCarthy
about
at the Radio Sheffield? Yeah, he's a machine. He comes up, you just want to give him an hug.
Sort of, we've broken up the sort of coaches, so
Yeah.
we'll finish on our final 2 grades, and then we can get a bit more into the more general chat to round it off. But Darren Moore, I think this is probably the most interesting grade we're going to give out. So, Alex, how do you think Darren did?
It's really, really difficult to put one on it. I'd probably say a middle of the road C. You know, the signs are good and all the rest of it, but ultimately he didn't manage to inspire the sort of new manager bounce that the run that Tomo had when he came in, for example, that would have kept Wednesday up. You look at, there's been a lot of comparing to Lee Boyer, and they're completely different circumstances. So I think that's unfair. But ultimately, other managers were able to come in. It's a myth, by the way, the new manager bounce thing. More often than not, there's not. You know, statistically, the chances of a manager coming in and things improving straight away, the numbers just aren't there. But yeah, ultimately, you know, he came in with a very, very, very difficult job to do, and he didn't manage to do it. But you know, whatever hand he has had in playing in the released list, I think is positive. Yeah, C plus.
Yeah,
Bearing in mind, I'm going to be speaking to him in a few weeks.
I'd go the same, and I think, to be honest, you've also got to factor in the fact that he was in hospital. You know, like he had pneumonia, he had blood clots on his lungs, he missed a lot of training, he missed a lot of games, and I think, you know, it's almost unfair to give him any kind of mark, you know, based on the actual amount of games he got to oversee. But it is worth pointing out, I think, and me and Alex have spoken about it a lot, the style of football changed drastically when he came in. And if you compare the chances created, the shots, all the sort of attacking stats that you want to look at, they all improve under Darren Moore. And that is a big, big deal for a team that have been grim to watch for a lot of the season. Under Darren, there seemed to be more of an attacking impetus there, and that's no coincidence. You know, there is no luck involved there. That's down to the work that Darren and Jamie and Paul Williams have done. So yeah, I think I'll go sort of, if we're going the pluses and minuses, maybe a B minus, C plus, somewhere along those lines. But I as Alex said, the results ultimately weren't enough, but it's it would be difficult to lay too much blame at Darren's door, because as far as I'm concerned, Wednesday were relegated by the time that he came in anyway.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I mean, touch on that. Like you say, when I saw you at Wednesday appointed him, it was the feeling of, well, he might keep them up, but he probably won't. And if they don't, he's a good manager for League One. And that's sort of the view I saw is, you know, for a League One rebuild, he's sort of the perfect man you need. But no, like you say, in terms of his actual, you know, time at the end of the season, he came in at a hard position. Like you say, he then became ill, and obviously wouldn't have been able to spend the time he wanted with the squad, missing matches, etc. You know, it all went against him really, and to still, you know, bring it right down to the last minute, it's I think it was a pretty decent effort. So I think I'd give him a B.
Yeah, Ned.
C plus, B minus. Just obviously didn't achieve his aims, but everything else he did in terms of changing the style, the culture, the optimism, you know, very much promising signs.
Yeah, right. This is probably, you lads don't have to say too much on this, because I know that you have to speak to him, or at least want to speak to him in the future. But Dejphon Chansiri, well, I don't know how we're going to do this in a diplomatic way, but Joe and Alex, what do you make of Chansiri's sort of reign this season?
They were relegated by more than the points deduction. So if we're going to point the finger anywhere, you know, the finger first goes to Dejphon Chansiri, I think. And I think you know, that's ball out. Look, if we're going to give him a grade, he'd have to be an F. You know, that ultimately the buck stops with him. He said that himself. that it's his name above the door. And if you're looking for a pure statistical thing, like I say, Sheffield Wednesday were relegated by less than 6 points. I've written in a couple of pieces. I think they can feel unlucky from the first independent commission that gave them a 12-point deduction, because ultimately they spent that transfer window trying to sign players who ultimately were going to be signing for a League One club in a year's time. 6 points, they're in a relegation battle, but you're looking at them and so I think that they were very unlucky there, because the transfer window had closed by the time that had been halved. There's so many sort of caveats to it, but yeah, I'm not sure whether Dave Fonchansiri would argue with that grade. I think, as I say, he said that it's his name above the door. He's responsible for what happens at Sheffield Wednesday. And the running of the club at the time that they were trying to sidestep FFP, however you want to phrase it, they didn't do it in a sophisticated enough way, despite very, very generous winks and nudges from the EFL. Lads, you need to sort this out, and it didn't happen. All this sort of stuff. So yeah, I don't think many people could argue that, including the man himself, who, as I say, has said a number of times it's his name above the door and he's responsible for what happens.
Yeah.
I kind of echo that. I think that there's nothing really more to add with that. I think one thing with the chairman, he's been asked when we've been in press conferences, about what he would say to people who say Wednesday are in a worse position now than when he took over, and he's always said he didn't think they were, but now categorically they are. You look at the league position, by definition they are in a worse position now than when he took over, and it's a massive year this now. When it comes down to ticket prices, work that goes on in terms of rebuilding that that connection with the fans and the team again. The chairman's got a big role to play in that, and Alex did a great piece on sort of how Venky's at Blackburn sort of managed to fix things, and hopefully the Wednesday situation is salvageable, because I generally do believe that his heart is in the right place, in terms of on a very sort of core level, that he wants the best for Sheffield Wednesday Football Club. There are things that have happened that have been completely against that have gone actively against the club, but I don't think any of it has been malicious, and I really do think he wants the best for the club.
Yeah, Will.
Yeah, I'd echo what Joe said in that. There's some managers who blatantly just don't care about the club. They're in it for the money, and that's it. And I don't think Chansiri is one of those. I think he does care. He just hasn't got it right. And whether that's through transfers or whatever, managers, it's hard to say. But yeah, like if we were giving him a grade, I'd have to agree with Alex in that it's an F, because ultimately I think the finger does point at him.
Yeah, and as
yeah, I can't really add much, to be honest. That hasn't already been said. Yeah, perhaps the most pressed issue now is the wages. I mean, have they been paid yet, Alex or Joe? As in, you aware?
We don't know.
Yeah.
I always say to people that the guys are, whether it's players, whether it's agents, whoever, very quick to go to the media when they don't get paid. Not so much when they do get paid. So we're not entirely sure.
I'm alright thinking that this could be complete utter bullshit, but I'm pretty sure I saw that after 12 weeks, if they don't get paid, are they allowed to walk out their contracts?
Something along that. I'd have to check the exact bits on it, but there is something along those lines. Yeah. It's
I think that's sort of basic, not basic, but that's just employment law rather than a footballer.
Yeah.
I think my understanding is there are at least some issues with the payment situation.
That would top off the season quite some way.
But just everybody leaving.
Yeah. Goodbye.
I think if the club have been, or rather Chansiri has been transparent throughout on this. He has said we've got cash flow issues, there are going to be problems. Other clubs have had these problems as well.
Yeah.
They haven't been as widely publicised as has been the case at Wednesday. But it's a difficult position when there's basically one source that's bankrolling a football club, vast sums of money, and then something like the pandemic kicks in, and so I do have sympathy, actually, a great deal of sympathy really for where they are. The frustration is that after it's happened so many times, they're at the point now where they're approaching players and that they need to get it sorted one way or another. So that's where the frustration is. But like I say, I do have a bit of sympathy for the club at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've sort of covered enough Wednesday. It's been as light-hearted and upbeat as it possibly could be. So just the final thought before we wrap it up. So wrapping up because obviously conscious of the time. New season, new destinations for the both of you. Not perhaps the more glamorous stadiums you were hoping for, but certainly got a bit more character. So what's the ground you're most excited to visit? What's the ground you're least excited to visit? And when we've had you on individually, we've asked about press food. So is there any sort of press food you've heard whispers about being especially good or, especially bad?
Alex, you can go first on this because the press food I've never even had any.
I'd like to think I have got a PhD in football ground press food, so I'm certainly a man on this. No, I haven't heard any whispers. I think the Doncaster Rovers writer that he did say that there was something around the corner. I think maybe Ipswich. There's like some sort of Pan-Asian gig going on down there that I'm looking forward to getting.
I think Liam also said that they do a good curry at Sunderland.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
I think he said that. Yeah.
I'm basically on the back of that. I'm delighted that Sheffield Wednesday got relegated. No. I think in terms of I think the very fact that Sheffield Wednesday are in League One means there'll be a lot of matches moved around for telly. I would bet a healthy wager that Sheffield Wednesday will be away at Portsmouth on a Friday night. And that's one that I'm looking, because it's not even one you go, I'll get the weekend, because ultimately you've got to travel back on a Saturday. So I've done a lot of whinging on this podcast. I've got the best of it. I am looking forward to that. Having watched Bradford City at a few grounds, there's not actually that many new grounds as I was hoping when I was having a look. I think when the dust settles, there will be sort of it's easier to heal in a division that you're more likely to win more games in, ultimately. And if you are going to do a big rebuild, doing that in the Championship would have been a nightmare, because it's very difficult to do. So, whether Wednesday can put together a promotion push or not, I don't know. I think history sort of tells you that's quite rare. Everyone's looking at Hull City at the minute, but they're the outliers, really. These big clubs that come down from the Championship. It can take a season or 2 or 3 or 4 or, and unfortunately longer than that. So
it can take 6 if you're Sheffield United.
I wasn't going to stick the knife in there. They're doing all right. But I think Sunderland's probably the one that we're all looking at. It's a new ground for me. And that'll be like old times, that one, I think.
Yeah. Joe?
Yeah, same in terms of looking forward to, definitely Sunderland. I haven't done Stadium Light, so that's sort of top of my list to get to. I think Plymouth away is going to be a long trip.
You can do that
away day, that. Seriously.
If we're still on one writer per away game, you can have Plymouth, mate. That's all yours.
Thanks, appreciate that.
I did Exeter last year, so I've got cash in the bank.
To be fair, that was 100% the worst away trip of this past season.
Yeah.
Purely, not even because of how far it was. It was just the most awkward place to get to, wasn't it?
It was a nightmare.
He got Liam under goal though, so that made it a little bit worth it.
He just morphed into Zinedine Zidane for half an hour, didn't he?
That was magical.
I think they're probably the two for me. There is the potential if I'm going purely on a I suppose touristy level. There's a few quite nice little places in League One. Like go and do some sightseeing and that. Go visit a few old buildings and that.
Yeah.
Take some pictures for my Instagram.
No, I've got it. I've got it. I'm going. It's only because Joe's talking about like seeing cultural buildings and stuff. I'm going the whole hog the other way. I've been on a couple of cricket tours and a stag do to Blackpool. If Blackpool stays,
yeah, Blackpool's quality.
You know, Alex, for Blackpool, we're both going. Even if only one of us allowed in the game, we're both going out in Blackpool.
There's an indie bar called the Manchester that I can just imagine about 5,000 Wednesdayites in, and yeah, I'll be bouncing.
In fact, I can't believe no one's mentioned Accrington yet. Accrington, that's about as good as a away day gets.
Yeah.
That's about 30 minutes from my. That's closer to me than Sheffield is. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are talking to obviously Barnsley fans who, you know, have experienced some League One away days, and by all accounts,
don't knock it. League One's better than the Championship. Yeah. I'm sorry, it just is. I mean, the away days in League One are genuinely brilliant. You're gonna go to Gillingham, that's the main stand propped up by scaffolding. You know, it's sensational.
It really is.
But I was most disappointed when Forest Green got knocked out by Newport in that last minute winner, because the prospects of sausage rolls at Forest Green away, you know, there was a lot of promise there. But
I might just go there anyway.
Just go there anyway. Goes to Dale Vince. Sorry, what's his name? Is it Vince Dale or Dale Vince?
It's Dale Vince.
Dale Vince. Well,
he's like the owner version of Gareth Ainsworth, isn't he?
Well, what a game that was. To be fair, that was some good. The whole playoffs. To be fair, there wasn't one disappointing game.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about them.
Anyway, they don't need to fuel these guys' egos with the Barnsley stuff. Honestly, if they talk about me moaning, should have seen these two when Barnsley got knocked out by Swansea. Some of the stuff they were saying about the Swansea players cheating, it was quite comical.
Don't get started on it, it'll wind me up again. I've just got over it.
Yeah. Finally, I know we've not got the biggest audience, but we'll let you both plug a couple of things. We'll let you plug first, Alex. How's the book release doing?
Yeah, it's going really well, Tom. To be fair, I'd be surprised if it wouldn't, because I never stopped going on about it on Twitter. Yeah, no, I've been really, really chuffed with the reaction. And yeah, we've sold out on Amazon on the first day, and some really encouraging signs. And yeah, like I say, the reaction to it has been really generous. You work on something like that for the best part of a year, and you get so nervous about just like a Twitter backlash of you got this wrong, you got that wrong, and all the rest of it. And thankfully that's not happened, and people seem to be enjoying it, which is the main thing. So yeah, check me out on Twitter. I'm doing signed copies at the minute. 15 quid, absolute bargain. Father's Day coming up. I'll do you some offers if you want to buy in bulk. We'll do like a Costco thing going on.
Oh dear.
I just like the idea of your house just full of books. There's copies of it everywhere.
You go, but my fiance tripped over a box of copies of 91. So I need to get rid of them.
And Joe?
I'm just going to plug my Twitter account because I am not as cultured and I don't write books like Alex does. Which, by the way, I have finished the book. It is genuinely really good. There's a page towards the back where he thanks a colleague, which is brilliant.
He's got it on hand and everything.
It's really well worded. I'm just going to plug my Twitter account, which is Yes We Crann on Twitter, which over the next few months you will see a few transfer rumours, some one-tweet film reviews, and probably just me moaning about no football being on until England win the Euros, and then it'll be great.
Brilliant.
Yeah, good stuff. Once again, lads, thank you for coming on. We really enjoyed doing the first episodes with you, and I'd argue maybe it's even better, as I've got to revel in the pain of Sheffield Wednesday. As always, you can find us on Twitter at Floodlight Pod. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video. We're on Spotify and Apple now as well, so do follow us on there, and we'll catch you in the next podcast. Thank you
very much, guys.
Cheers.